Hey everybody, Jerome Maldonado. So we're talking about hyperinflation, accelerated inflation is, they're talking about it's spreading nationwide and even worldwide. And so I know a lot of people question the fact and they say, okay, where is the stability in our future markets? Are we gonna be able to afford gas? Like gas is going crazy right now, right? This is no different than what happened in 2004, 5, 6. Gas prices got crazy. I always drive big, giant diesel trucks because I used to pull a bunch of tractors. I still do when I need to, maybe like once every 4 months. But I still drive them because when I have a need for them, right? So when every single work truck that we have costs us $110 to fill up, and we were filling them up with a quarter tank on them, it becomes expensive. So one of the big things was we sit back and we start seeing inflation in everything. I'm pricing out some new homes that I'm building, and I'm looking at the expenditures. And so I sit back and I say, okay, electrical has went up by, will it catch me on this? Yeah. Electrical has went up by 130%. So you have electrical 130% increase, okay? Lumber had went up by 230%, now back down by 90%. So we're still up 140%, right? So lumber is still up. So still up 140%. Okay. Then we have, like, these are electrical products, right? They're up like 130%. Now, understand, labor's up too, but not as much as some of this stuff. So how does this, when you're underwriting a deal and you're looking at market trends and you're looking at evaluations of stuff, you know, you look at petroleum products, so all oil-based petroleum products, they're up about 100%. Okay, now these are just on materials. So how do I evaluate this stuff? Well, I'll show you. So I go in, I look at a house, okay? Now, typically there's called the 1/3 rule, okay? So there's, on materials, there's what's called the 1/3 rule, okay? Now, this is just for underwriting purposes. So for those of you guys who are coming in, you're saying, hey, I want to underwrite how to build a house, and I want to see how the inflationary market is affecting me. Well, what I utilize is I use a simple rule called the 1/3 rule, okay? Now, what is the 1/3 rule? That means that 1/3 of the entire cost from any trade is going to be materials, okay? So 1/3 is materials. 1/3 is labor. And 1/3 is gross profit, not net profit, gross profit, okay? Okay, so 1/3 materials, 1/3 labor, 1/3 gross profit, okay? So the company is making a gross profit of 1/3, okay? Now that's before probably insurance and workman's comp, 941 taxes, so forth and so on. 1/3 is labor, the cost of what it takes you to have employees run, facilitate, and execute a project. And then 1/3 materials, okay? So you sit back and you say, okay, electrical for a house for me was typically costing me about $15,000 to $16,000 for about a 2,400 square foot house. So let's call it $15,000, okay? So you sit back at $15,000 and you go 1/3 of that, so 15,000 times 0.3333, right? 1/3, $5,000, okay, is materials. Okay, so you take 1/3 of that, that's $5,000. So 1/3 equals $5,000. Okay, so if it's up by 130%, not all materials are up by 130%, but let's say that they are, okay? So times, so you're gonna be about $11,000 on just your materials, okay? So you take $11,000. Okay, now, So how do you figure it? That's $6,000 more, right? So you take a $15,000 estimate and you add $6,000 to that price. Okay, so now what used to cost me $15,000 is going to cost me $21,000. Okay, so let me get another color marker so we can see this distinguished. And let's go $16,000. So that's going to be $21,000. So $21,000. Okay, for that same product. Okay, now we have this on petroleum products. So all your crude oils, your paints, all of that stuff is going to increase. So if you take your entire build cost, okay, and let's say that we're up, because not everything's up by 100. These are the worst. These are the most escalated. Now, lumber, we've already kind of absorbed. We're starting to see the decline on this. So where a lumber package used to cost me $30,000, $32,000 for an entire house, now costs me closer to about $40,000. I'm about $10,000 higher than I used to be on lumber. So when I go in and I take a look at the purchase price of my lumber packages, I'm closer to about $40,000, $45,000. Now, when you look at this stuff and you sit back and you go, okay, I'm going to be paying about $3,000 to $5,000 per trade. Okay, so what trades are those? You sit back and you go, okay, I have concrete. I got lumber. I have, these are your big capital expenses. I have electrical. I have plumbing. I have heating and cooling, HVAC, right? I got roofing. Now, believe it or not, roofing materials haven't went up that much. Roofing materials always go up. So they're like a commodity that rises up and down, up and down, up and down based on how busy the market is. So roofing, what I have found, hasn't really escalated that much. Small margins, they pretend like it's going up, but it goes up and down so much that it really hasn't been affected. Now, flooring, tile, trim out stuff, so a lot of that stuff hasn't really went up that much either. So if you go to Home Depot, you go to Lowe's, you go to, and you shop some of this stuff at like Kohler, American Standard, Glacier Bay, a lot of the big manufacturers of a lot of our trim out items for plumbing and toiletry and so forth like that, and so forth and so on. What lands up happening is a lot of those prices are still pretty stable. You can still find tile prices very stable, very similar to what they've always been. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the big cost variations. So concrete's went up a little bit, not a lot. I think by yard, I pour a lot of concrete. So pre-pandemic, we were paying about $120 a yard for concrete. Now we're at $125, $138, so $140 a yard on concrete. So we're up a small margin. Maybe you're going to spend an extra $3,000 here. Okay, for concrete. Lumber, you're going to spend an extra about 10 to 15,000. Okay, now we've already underwrote lumber into our business model at a 230% increase. So it's actually went down. So I'm going to leave lumber as a big X right now. Okay, because the business model that we exercise, lumber's been on the incline for 2.5 years. Okay, so we've already absorbed that. We've already written that into our business model. So in current inflation, it's not affecting us anymore. In fact, lumber is going down in cost, okay? So although it's up from where it was 2.5 years ago, it's still lower than it was a year ago by over 100%, or close to 100%, sorry. Now, electrical products are. So you're gonna spend an extra $5,000 to $6,000 for electrical. Plumbing materials, you're gonna spend about an extra $4,000 per home for electrical. Now, this is based on our business model, about a 2,500 square foot home, between 2,000 and 2,500. Heating and cooling, you're gonna be in your materials probably about the same, about maybe 3,500 to 4,000. Roofing materials, I'm gonna call that a wash, okay? So let's add these up. You have a total price of $6,000, that's $10,000, that's $14,000, that's $17,000, okay? $17,000 increase in pricing right now. Okay, so this is going to cost you about $17,000 to build that house. Let's even do better than this. Let's call it 20K. Okay, you're going to be 20K higher. Now, houses have went up about 16 to 20%. Let's just call it 18%. Okay, so if you take an entire house price, and let's say, for example, I was building homes, most of the homes that I was building right in the 2,400, 2,500 square foot range, were selling for about $550 a square foot. So you take a $550,000 house, okay? Take a $550,000 house, and it's up by 18%. Okay, so you take 550,000 times 0.18, $99,000 more, plus 550. The new sales price on that exact same home, $649,000, okay? This house right here, I'm going to make probably about 130. I'd have made about 130 grand on. Okay, we subtract out that $20,000 from that. That's $629,000. Okay, we subtract that 629 from 550. So you take $629,000 minus 550. That's $79,000 larger profit. So you add that to the 130. You're making an extra $209,000. Now, you're not actually making $209,000 because now your sales commissions are higher. Now your closing costs are slightly higher. And so you're going to have a little bit of additional expenses. But even if you made $180,000, ladies and gentlemen, and you just added an extra $50,000 to this instead of the 79, ladies and gentlemen, and let's say that was actually $30,000 in additional expenses, now you're making $180,000. Now, then. So ladies and gentlemen, are you worried about inflation? Yeah, we're worried about inflation. But even if things stabilize where they are right now, even if it cost you 20 to, and by the time we did that, we actually probably did this at about $35,000 more. You still make $180,000 profit. You can build this model out in less than 6 months and turn a profit of $180,000. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a very lucrative profitability with hyperinflation. And so what's happening right now is with hyperinflation and everything, and all this accelerated inflation is bad. But if you're in the right industry, ladies and gentlemen, your profitability is still incredible. And so why is behind land and building houses one of the most incredible industries in the world? Because if you could take advantage of what's happening with hyperinflation, even here in all of this sector of building houses, and you still pay inflated prices, your profitability is still substantially larger than what it would have been 2 years ago, because you're also taking advantage of the inflation that's happening nationwide. Now, what ends up happening when if a market adjustment happens? Here's what typically happens. This is what happened in 2008. This is what happened in the late 90s, and this is what happened in the early 80s when the market adjustment hit, and there was financial recessions. Now, do I think it's going to happen in the housing market? Not with a housing shortage. We got about a decade. Now, can the market soften? Absolutely. And if that market softens, what happens when the market softens typically is that economically, goods and services also soften as well. So when the market softens, goods and services, now it does take about a year for that to catch up, but this number comes back down. When these numbers stabilize, even if they come back down, even in a percentage, you're only going to go back down to this. And so if you go from this back down to this, I was okay with a $130,000 profitability, but I'll sure as shit take $180,000 profitability. But ladies and gentlemen, the house prices that are selling for this are very unlikely to ever go back down all the way to this, okay? So even if they went down to this, you may see it for a very short period of time, but it goes back up quick. And here's how I know. So back in 2008, I go back into California, and my wife and I get married in California in Laguna Beach. We love the area. We love the Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach, Dana Point. We love PCH Highway. That whole area there is one of our favorite places just to go hang out. So we say, how cool would it be to have an investment property that we could own on the water in Laguna Beach? So we go out and we start shopping real estate and buy a place up in Laguna Beach. And so when we sit back, we go back and I look at market trends. I always look at things on how they trend. And so what I landed up doing is we sat back, we went with 4 different realtors and we went and shopped that market. I'm talking shop that market, 2 different weekends, 2 different trips. And we just shopped the hell out of that market for 2 solid, hard weekends of really going out there and aggressively shopping that market. Now, my son hadn't been born when we first looked at that market. We were looking to buy. The prices were up over $1,100 a square foot. Then the recession hits. Thank God we didn't buy because the prices went all the way down to as low as like $600 a square foot. And even some creeped a little lower than that. So prices almost dropped by almost in half. Not quite in half, but they almost went in half. And so in 2009, 2010, we start going back out to Laguna Beach to start looking at houses. 2010, we start looking aggressively again. And so we go back out with realtors. We're out there shopping. One of the same realtors, I love this lady. She was one of the women that we utilized down there. She was a little bit older, but she was probably one of the most assertive realtors that I had ever done business with in my entire life. She was super incredible. Anyways, so she takes us out, we shop these markets, and we start looking at the comps. And we sit back and go, okay, comps are slowly starting to rise. We could still buy in the high $600 range a square foot because the market was still tainted from the recession. But all of a sudden, we buy and we start seeing house prices start to escalate. And as the house prices start to escalate, we sit back in 2016 and say, okay, it's time to sell. House prices are sitting at $1,100 a square foot. That's where they had gotten $649 pre-recession. They can't go any higher, I told my wife. I go, we're maxing out pre-recession numbers. When things were crazy, whoa, oh my God, right? Pre-recession numbers, we're hitting them. When they dropped back down to something like this, they went up to this. I said, let's sell. So we sold. Now, the house price was substantially higher than this, and our profitability was substantially more than this, but we sold. Point being is that when the market was at the best and it went to its worst, it climbed back up to its best, and I thought, time to exit. Guess what happened, ladies and gentlemen? It continued to climb. So if you look at today's market out there, things are selling for over $1,400 a square foot, all the way up to $1,600 a square foot, and even more in some areas. So what that tells me is when you look at a market with inflation that we think in today's day and age is going to hit its maximum potential, even at its maximum potential, when money continues to get printed and printed and printed and printed, as time and a decade of time starts to escalate, and it goes by fast, faster than you want it, and it moves, even if you go back to this and make this, and then it slowly escalates back to this, ladies and gentlemen, will become $750K in 10 years from now. Now, yes, this number will continue to go up. This number will continue to go up. And this number will continue to go up. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can sit back and worry about hyperinflation, or you can sit back and just live life and unfold life as it happens. I sat down with Fred DeLuca, the founder of Subway. And when I sat down with Fred DeLuca several years ago, I asked him, I said, Fred, what do we do about the labor expense when the federal government regulates an increased minimum wage across the board nationwide? How are we going to be able to afford? And it was just in conversation. It wasn't like in a worrisome question like, oh my God, we're going to fall apart. It was more like, hey, Fred, you know, how have you accounted for this stuff? I mean, there's got to be a way in business, right, that you account for inflation. Inflation of labor, inflation of goods and services and products and materials and everything else. How do you account for this, Fred? And he said, Jerome, when I first started selling sub sandwiches back in the 60s, I used to sell subs for under $1. They were 65 cents for a foot-long sub. Jerome, we still have the $5 foot long, and now subs cost as much as $8.50, even $9 a sub. He goes, as things inflate, we just raise the prices. We just raise the prices to accommodate the current market standards and what's happening. So if you guys notice on TV now, you very rarely say, hear the $5 foot long song anymore. You know, $5 foot long. You don't hear that no more, because they can't afford to do the $5 foot long anymore. So what is it? The $6 foot long, the $7, $8 foot long? I don't know. But point being is that prices go up with materials. Hyperinflation, everything just moves up together. The living wage, payroll, income, profitability, everything goes up in hand. And that's why it's so important to be able to understand how money works, affluency. But ladies and gentlemen, hyperinflation is real. Things are happening where things are going up. And I wouldn't call it hyperinflation, I call it accelerated inflation. But as accelerated inflation happens, your income should also inflate with it, and you should be making larger profitability compared to where you were. And we are. On median homes, ladies and gentlemen, we were never making anything close to this. The first house I ever built back in the late 90s, I made like $83,000. Now we're making over $100,000 more than we were making then. But our business model, we sit back and say, if you screw all this up and you only make half of that, how does an extra $80,000 for one build feel for you in 6 months? Pretty damn good. Ladies and gentlemen, inflation is real. It's happening. It's going to continue to happen. Things will stabilize. Prices will come back down, but then they will go back up. And then we'll get to, because see what happens, I always feel like the world's testing you, right? Like, can you handle it? Like, it's like a little joke. Can you handle this price? Can you handle this inflation? Oh, just joking. Let's take it back down. And then when they take it back down, they start creeping it back up on you again, real slow. And then you don't even recognize it. You're like, yeah, we've been here before. We've seen this before. Yeah, it's not as scary as I thought it was, but it happens. And all of a sudden that becomes the new norm. This becomes the new norm. And now you just accept it. Now all of a sudden it goes from this to this, and you don't even realize it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's life. That's growth. That's economics. And that's how business and that's how inflation works worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, it's happening, it's real. Position yourself for the profitability increase for this versus this, instead of worrying about this. Don't worry about this. If you worry about this, you're going to be caught as a victim. Be part of the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how you go out and compound your success.